the way that they talk about their art. So just to give you an overview, I think we're going to start by introducing the artists that are the artists in residence, give them a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about them and their practice. And then it's maybe a little hokey, but we're going to just, as little avatars, travel together to each person's room and then individually spend about 10 to 15 minutes talking about each artist's work and the progress that they've made over the course of the month. So let's start with Emrys, if you could just maybe give us 2 minutes, quick overview, who you are, where you're from, and just a little bit about your practice. That would be cool.
Yeah, I was expecting Yelly to go first, so that was surprising. I don't know why.
Sorry. Why don't we go
Amanda in front of like alphabetical?
I looked at the like closest picture to me. Let's go in order, which I didn't do intentionally. Let's go in order of the rooms from left to right.
Oh no, sorry, Yelly.
I'll make Yelly go first.
Okay. I just have a little thing. Oh, I have to mute the public access memories. I'm like, what is in my ear? Okay. Can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so okay, I'm gonna speed through this because 2 minutes. My name is Yeli. I'm from Abuja. I'm based in Brooklyn. I work mostly in the mediums of writing and code, working primarily with the data sets and then sometimes just like exploring what the web as a medium has to offer. So I think a few projects that kind of cover like what my practice is. I have a previous project because I was having a conversation and I said the word like fuckboy, and I started thinking, oh, like what are the like there's so many words in the dictionary that I know of that are like derogatory towards sexually liberated women. So I made a project that was just kind of like documenting all the gendered words in the dictionary and kind of like trying to see like across the English language, like how does it reflect societal like norms. And I think in this case it's like, yeah, the societal norm that's like about like shaming people for shaming women particularly. So just exploring what words exist in the English language, what words exist in surplus for a particular gender. Some of my like the questions, I think a lot of my practice is around just like questions I have and I'm trying to clarify for myself. Some of them are just like more casual, like in Nigerian music there's a lot of songs that are about women, and so I had a data set collected of like what are the most popular women's names that are used in Nigerian songs. This is just like a silly cute, like I was trying to figure out whether I'm a tweeter or retweeter. I also get like preoccupied with like a visual form. So I think when I went through a breakup maybe, I don't know, like 5 years ago, and I wanted to recreate the drama from just like announcing the breakup publicly. So I recreated kind of like the celebrity mag like split where they just like draw a huge like X or like tear in the middle of a picture. This was from a while ago, but I wanted to see when I was in Nigeria what it looks like for Wi-Fi speeds to be represented as loading screens, because in Nigeria and a lot of African countries, like the internet is really slow. This is my most recent project, so I've been exploring like what grief and uncertainty and like a lot of maybe more tricky emotions can look like and how to represent them, and what the web specifically has to offer for representation. So I think for this project, I was trying to explore the permissionlessness and like spontaneity of grief, which is something I wasn't quite able to get to like writing fiction or writing poetry or writing nonfiction. For the residency, I wanted to explore the concept of trust or reliance on an innate but external mechanism, what it could look like to surrender to something else on a platform like the web that's very like active and responsive to our decisions. I wanted to recreate something that felt like a guided walk or a guided tour. It started first. Also, Jenna, I didn't know how much we're going to talk about the project later, so how much I should get into it now?
Yeah, I think we're gonna spend 10 to 15 minutes specifically on your project.
Okay.
So now, yeah, we just want to frame who you are,
Yeah.
a little bit about you.
Okay. I think that's who I am. So I can stop there. And I'll talk about the project later. So, who's Emrys?
Sorry, I think my computer froze for a second. I didn't hear if someone said my name before. Hi, I'm Emrys. I'm based in Chicago. I have a history of doing art and technology stuff. I think thinking about like net art in particular, like I really like the web as a medium, but like in projects I do, I think I tend to sort of utilize whatever technology makes sense. Yeah, in reflecting about like what to say, based on the questions that Jenna gave, which were super nice and helpful, um, I was thinking about how I tend to use like natural phenomena in a lot of my work, and like the way that that is blended with technology, and that they're not really they're not like butting heads. They're more sort of like blended together. Context that's important now though is that although I've like been in the art world for a bit, or like one art world, I've recently, I guess semi-recently, maybe like over the last 2 years, but like shifted into more of a librarianship and archivist position. And so I've been thinking a lot about ways to like blend those two modalities. Yeah, let me look what I was gonna say also. Yeah, I think I've also been much more recently into like text and writing. And so you'll probably see that show up in my work more. And I'll pause to talk about my project, but yeah, I think that's all I need to say about myself. I'll talk more about my project when we get to that point. So it'll be a
Cool.
mystery.
Amanda.
Yay, hi. I'm Amanda, and I'm an artist based sort of across Europe. I'm currently based more or less in Basel, Berlin, and Brussels. And what I often, or like what I'm interested in my work is, on the one hand, decentralization, which I also apply to myself. And then on the other hand, especially in recent projects, I've looked at how technology basically changes the way that we remember, and how that influences our perception of reality as well. And I think like one thing that is important to explain about like how I apply decentralization to myself is that I do exist as basically multiple body minds. So if I don't necessarily need to be in the same body or mind to still refer to myself as me. So they basically exist multiple sort of entities that are Amanda spread across Europe so far. And that's also quite important, or like that comes up quite a lot in the work that I worked on during this residency. And yes, I think like generally I work very project dependent. So I work with different things. I've worked with large language models or also NFTs, and it really sort of depends on what I'm doing, on like what tools then I'll use to sort of bring the project to completion. And I think like the web in general has, or like programming in general has so many amazing things that we can interact with and that have influence the work so in different ways. Yeah.
Yay. And last but not least, Selicia.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. So I'm Selicia. I'm originally come from China, and now I'm living in London. And in the past few years, my practice like three further thresholds between bodies and machines, myriads, memories and codes, and gender powers. And my work explores mostly like the dissolving identities and shifting digital embodiments. And recently, I'm working on more on the witchcraft, deities, and like the forgotten lineages through the circles and screens. And my aesthetic is rooted in the deep fascinations with nostalgia and imperfections, like drawing inspirations from the raw experimental CGI renderings of the 90s, when the computer graphic rendering technology was still in their early stage. And technically, I'm working with like machine learning and websites and game engines. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing a little bit about you. We are going to, together through our avatars. Admittedly, we aren't traveling very far, but we're going to start by going to Yeli's studio and learn a little bit more about the project that Yeli has been working on over the last month. So, and Yeli, I'll let you sort of dictate. I don't know if you want to like give people a moment to explore your work, or you're welcome to hop in and start talking about it. I will defer to you in terms of how you want to introduce this work.
Maybe give it like a minute. Okay. Okay, I'll start talking again. Where is the share screen? Okay. So yeah, for the residency, I wanted to explore the concept of trust or reliance on an innate but external mechanism. So what it could look like to surrender to something else on a platform like the web that's very active and responsive to our decisions. I wanted to create something like a guided walk or a guided tour. The idea started with plants. So like I have a bunch of pictures of just like plants that are like leaning towards the sun, like all kind of like moving in the same direction. Um, and I found them mesmerizing. I have like maybe like 200 pictures of them on my phone. And I really wanted to take some of that certainty and decisiveness for myself. I think that was maybe why I was collecting them. Like they gave me a sense of comfort, being the anxious overthinker that I am. I wanted to use their direction and I wanted to create the feeling of following a path on the web. In terms of web inspiration, like I really like this project that is bringing another natural force, the wind, to a platform like the web. So like your cursor is moving according to like how the wind is blowing on a current day in a specific location. Yeah, and then how can we bring external natural forces to the web and have them guide the way we move? What I wanted for the project was for it to feel unexpected, as taking a walk, not knowing where it will lead you or what you will see. So the images and the paths can change on reload, which is one of the wonderful parts of the web and working with the browser is just like randomness. And so people's experiences with the work vary. Like the first image you may see, the next image you may see, like what you end on. The only thing that follows a linear flow is the text, and everything else is random. I really like the idea of like forcing people that are logging in from different places, different time zones, to have something about their experience be shared. Which is another thing I really love about the web and also about public access memories as a platform is just like the like telepresence. So like, seeing the avatars kind of be on top of each other in a space. I think for this project, the idea that like everybody is following like a path that has been defined for them by me, an illustrator. Like in the same way, when we're walking, we're all like stepping on the same path that other people have traveled. With this project, I want to create the feeling that we're all like tracing the same pixels. Yeah, this is just an image I really like. I think it's also reflective of a lot of what we see on public access memories. In terms of how the work evolved, I knew when I started that I wanted to bring the plants in. I think so I have all these plants and I wanted to bring that direction into the web, and not have it necessarily be like accurate in terms of like the exact angle or dimensions, but kind of like the essence of it. I wasn't sure what the user interaction should be. I think my first thought was just like, I'm just going to make everything auto scroll. So kind of the user doesn't do anything. The page just moves on its own from one place to another. But I think at some point that felt really boring, and didn't feel like it was taking advantage of what the web has to offer, which is like interaction, like people like doing stuff on the page. I realized I wanted users to engage with the elements. So I came up with the idea of tracing on the path, which felt right because the user had to do something, but the thing they had to do was follow a path set out for them. I think, yeah, this is just like a video of the interaction with the little feet of just like following a predefined path and then having that be what moves you forward on the website. So I think moving forward, what feels most resolved is that I think it does feel guided. Like I think I do like just like the idea of the tracing of the path. It is like a fade out to the next screen, which I think is the thing where like well, I don't know. It feels kind of basic, like just like fading out to the next screen. So I think Jenna and I were talking about other ways of just exploring like movement across on a website that feels less, maybe feels more like a walk. Just feels something more, I think, than just like, okay, the images transition in and out. So I would say that would be the next step for me, is just like kind of digging deeper into like the metaphor of like, okay, if the idea is a guided walk, like what does the transition from one view to another look like? Yeah.
Thank you. I want to take like maybe a couple minutes and just have a little Q&A if people have thoughts or reflections, if anything in this work comes up for you that makes you think about other artists, or if you have questions for Yeli. I want to take a couple minutes just to reflect.
Yeli, I have a question for you. I occasionally teach drawing in universities, and one of the exercises that we often do is called a blind contour, which is when you make a single line drawing that kind of follows elements of what you're looking at. And a technique that we use to communicate with the students about what they should be doing is describing taking a walk through what they see and following an edge. And so we had spoken about this project and the relationship between the path that the user might be taking on the page and something about like the gesture of the flowers or the plants that are in the image. And I'm really excited to see what you've done. And I'm curious about your thoughts on the actual gesture of the marks that you're making, because they're quite simplified, right? These like large gestures or straight lines. And I'm curious how you're seeing the relationship between those marks and the information in the photos. I think it works both ways, but I'm just curious what you're thinking about in that regard.
I think I wanted, like, I guess in terms of like when I look at the plants and it's mostly just like the sense of direction that I think was really like significant to me, because I think like if we look at each individual photo, like there are like multiple stems, but I think the beauty of it for me was just like not like they're all like kind of like they're all like presented together, but they're all kind of moving together. So I think with like the one line, the singular line, like I was exploring like, oh, like what would it look like to just represent every single stem? But I think I came back to like, oh, it was just like this general sense of direction. And I think when I'm on my walk sometimes, like it's like an unguided walk in terms of like I don't have an idea of where to go. I'm making a decision whether to turn right or left or go forward or backward based off, like sometimes I do it based off just like something that's in the street that I'm just like, oh, it's telling me to go this way. Like maybe it's a plant. So I think the relationship is just like kind of capturing just like the sense of direction, which can just be very simple, which is like an angle, like left or right. I think like with the straight lines, I do like the more big, like the curvier ones better. Like the straight lines do feel a little sanitized. So like that is something else I'm thinking about, but I don't know if there's a clear answer. Like I think I was exploring like maybe it's like less of like a line as in like point 1 to point 2, because that's not actually what it is in real life, or more just like a scribble. But my scribbles maybe just like technically looked like really scribbly, and I was like, okay, something in the middle between like a straight line and what it looks like when I'm drawing in Figma, because the latter version looked not derogatory, but looked like a kid kind of trying to attempt to draw a line. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think I get what you're saying, and there's something I do like about the singular direction, because at the end of the day, a direction has to be a single single dimension, and so taking something complex like a photo and then rendering it to one single thing,
Yeah,
is kind of the words are failing me now, but it's an interesting direction to take it, I think.
I think Nate has his hand up. Yeah, Nate.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sweet. So, I was wondering because I was thinking about what you said about being sort of trapped within a path. I don't know your exact wording, but like this like path that you're taking sort of has a external force over you, and I was thinking like at first sort of in a really cliche sense, like slowing down to like smell the roses or whatever, because there's obviously the plant motif and then the path as well. And there were a few times that I tried to do the interaction too quickly, and like my mouse would slide outside of the sort of bounding box, and it would take me a second to like get back, and I would really have to like focus on where I last ended and like make the motion correctly. So I wonder if you considered the difficulty of the interaction and the sort of how long it would take the viewer, or how focused the viewer would have to be to complete each interaction, rather than like when a UX or UI designer thinks of like click arrow to move to the next screen, they want it to be as like easy for the viewer to move there as possible. So I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, no, I wanted friction. Like I love friction. Like I feel like maybe more chaotically, I think when I first started the residency, I was like, I just want something like the user doesn't even do anything. Like there's something that's just like moving them around the screen, like kind of chaotically. But I think obviously like reduced it a little bit, but I'm like, I didn't want it to just like kind of like the initial implementation was just like you just slide and it just like within like 2 seconds the line is done. But I was like, oh, how do I introduce a little bit of friction, because I think I'm not trying to make like a UX or user experience like friendly like website. And I think it does work for the metaphor in terms of just like really taking your time and moving through something slowly, and like that kind of relegation of control of like, oh, I want to get through this thing quickly, but I can't.
Awesome, thank you.
I love that question. Maybe we'll take one more thought before we move on to the next artist. I guess I'll hop in and say, I think what this brings up for me is so much of the web, particularly if you're a UI UX designer, is, or at least in my perspective, thinking about how you sort of control the narrative, how you control the flow, how you direct the user's attention to certain parts of the website and create this like very curated experience. And I guess I wondered, like, there seems like there's a nuance here, like it is a directed flow, but it feels different for me from the objectives of like a software developer building an app. So I'm sort of curious about like your software development experience and like how you think about control and flow in the context of like building apps, and how like what the nuance or tension there is that feels different. If that question made sense.
Yeah, I think when I first started making websites, it was really nice for me to just leave something undone. Like I think, well, some of my projects, because I think there's a site called Glitch, and now it's like going out of service. But some of them are not online. But I think even some of them like that are like finished still have like, if you look hard enough, a little bit of a glitch, or things that are not working. And it was really nice for me in contrast to my job where it's like, well, everything kind of needs to be like perfectly polished, and like the Figma spec is like exact to like the pixels. And my personal work with the web has been a way of like releasing that. Like, so I'm just like, oh, like if I just kind of just concentrating on the essence of the idea, like if I feel like I can like, encapsulate like the feeling, or the emotion or whatever it is I was trying to get at, like the approximate feels enough in a way that it would never be enough working more professionally. I think it's an easy, I would say it's an easy shift. I think this is this is the more comfortable like dimension for me. Like I do actually, I feel like when I'm at work and I'm like, the thing is working, but maybe there's like a last 20%. Like I hate that 20% because I'm like, well, they like, can't they just, who cares that this thing is like off center by like 1 pixel. So I think this is a natural inclination for me to kind of just like allow things to be as they are, and like to have things be less perfect and curated and more kind of like character. They have character. Like that's what I call bugs in the code. I'm like character.
I love that. Yeli, thank you so much for sharing your insight and perspective and process. This has been a fun project to watch evolve, and I love the poetry that you embed in the sort of conceptual ways that you think about building websites. Very cool. Okay, we're gonna move on. Yay! I love emojis. I know that I built this site, but every time I get on Pam and I see everybody's emojis, it gives me a great little giggle. Cool. We are going to move on to Emrys's room. And this one, I think I'm hoping all of our emojis are going to show up in the same space. Yes. Oops. But your name's got a little messed up. Sorry about that. This is very much a work in progress. Anyways, Emrys, I'm kicking it off to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming into this room. I'm so happy to see. Actually, I want to take a screenshot really quick because of all the emojis on it. It's so funny.
I wish I had got the titles of their names messed up. Sorry.
I wonder, I mean, I can only see it on mine. I haven't like, when I was building this out, I was using like the mouse position instead of the user position. So I haven't like really experienced it with the like user icon before. But anyway, I'll back up so I can explain it a little bit, I suppose. Yeah, so this project is sort of a combination of two projects I've been working on the last couple of years. One of which was becoming really interested in this particular park in Chicago called Montrose Point Bird Sanctuary, which I did a bit of research on and like wrote an article on, or kind of two articles. But the interest I have in it is that its history is really interesting, where it was both a Nike military site, a Nike missile site during the Cold War. And then after that, the different like citizens of Chicago petitioned the government to turn it into a bird sanctuary because the plants that were planted to obscure the military equipment were really attractive to migratory birds. And as many parks do, during its like transition into a bird sanctuary that was more polished, it also became like a pretty central site for cruising in Chicago for gay men, publicly cruising. And so I just was like really interested in this place for the ways that like obscurity and like invisibility played out both in like the military history, but also in like gay history. And alongside that, the second project I was doing is that I've been processing these files from a bulletin board system from the 1990s that was based in Chicago. And for those who don't know, bulletin board systems, they're a proto-internet social communication platform that was started actually in Chicago in, I think it was either 1976 or 1978 during a blizzard that was using like the telecommunication network by converting just like, actually, I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but basically they're like localized telecommunication networks before the internet started, and they were really hugely popular and then sort of like sharply fell out of fashion once the World Wide Web became more mainstream. And what's interesting to me about this archival processing is that I've been reading a lot about cruising and like sexuality on through these files, but also about the AIDS epidemic. And I've just been thinking a lot about the parallels in like during the AIDS epidemic, how a lot of like public zones were shut down that were like historically holding sex, and also like that at the same time a lot of like new forms of communication rose, both like, and what's interesting is like a lot of that was communication about AIDS and like sort of a like underground network of communication. But like I've been particularly interested in like cruising and like sexuality and like the ways that personal ads evolved on those sites. And so I guess as sort of like a nod to those those interesting topics, I was kind of interested in just making a space where like I could hold some of the text that I've been processing from this bulletin board system in like an interesting browser space. So I'm not sure, I can only see it on my side, but when you should be able to like find text if you walk around the screen. I can find it. You can? Okay, cool. I'm so glad that you guys can see that. Those are all like anonymized, of course, but like they're verbatim personals from like this bulletin board system I've been seeing. And so I've been thinking about like this idea of encountering them and like the history of like just like people putting like their interests and like sexual desires out into the world and like how that shapes like spaces or not. Let me see if I have other things to say about that. Yeah. The way I think this is interesting to exist on the web because it's like a nod to the history of like digital telecommunication networks, and not the web in particular, but yeah, I also think though that like in terms of net art, I think of this more as like an exhibition space because like you're not posting your own stuff on here. It's not like a social media space. But I've been like really interested. I like was really excited about putting this, like doing this with Pam in particular, because Pam is like a social space where you can chat with people and stuff. So I thought it was just kind of an interesting dynamic that way. Yeah, that's all I'll say about it. I think questions probably would be good. I don't know. Please just like walk or use your like arrows to arrow around and move the bushes and find the text and try to read them.
I really like the way that the texts are obscured by the images. I think in general, I have sometimes a hard time wanting to read the things on sites. And I think this obscuring of the text really makes me want to kind of discover it more. But it also leaves me wanting more in general. Like I wish there were some like other, I don't know, deeper spaces that I could get into. I understand this might still be like, you know, the entry stages of this, but it leaves me like wanting more places to explore, if you don't know what I mean.
Yeah, I've been kind of thinking this is like proof of concept. So just like making sure like this is like formatted in the way I enjoy it. And like I agree, I want more. I also just realized I forgot to mention that like a lot these images are they're all Creative Commons licensed. And most of them are from Wiki Commons. And there's like a couple species that are like particular to the Montrose Bird Sanctuary. There's the honeysuckle and the goldenrod, just like as a nod. I forgot to mention that, but yeah.
Also, I didn't mean for that to come off as a criticism. I really enjoy how it is right now.
No, I didn't read it as that. Yeah, thank you.
Not a question. I really love, I think, like the text from the bulletin boards, like the entryway into like this intimate experience that may or may not happen, and like kind of walking through the space feels like kind of like the other end of that, like when the experience does happen. So I love how you kind of like capture kind of the full length of like the reaching out to like the actual like connection, all in the same place. Yeah.
I was gonna say I was in this gallery space earlier, and I think it's really cool how different it feels when you're in it alone versus now when there's like a big group as well. And something about just like the small shifts that the plants make as the text kind of comes in is just really awesome.
One thing we didn't talk about, because Emrys basically would send me designs and then I would make them fit within the pan gallery space. We didn't talk about how having multiple users in the space should operate, and I think that would be a conversation we could have into the future. But I agree that there's a different experience from feeling like maybe you're now in a more community shared messaging bulletin type of space. But I'm wondering if you have thoughts about, you know, if this were to continue into the future, like how does a group experience shape the work, or how might that, or could that might be different from the experience of it being solo?
Yeah, I think that's that's a tough question, right? Like, I think what's interesting is like a lot of my like research in this and like obviously doing the processing is like a solo thing. So like I'm just like doing this myself, and like I feel like probably that is super reflected in my bias creating this, because I'm just thinking about interacting with it as like a solo user. And like I have been thinking about this as like an exhibition platform that's like, and like you're wandering through this like in a group looking at the text that's very like museum-y, but like that isn't, like I acknowledge that like that is not like how the web necessarily should operate. So like I don't know, basically. I think also what's interesting is just like thinking about drawing on my experience, like when I'm in like queer spaces, party vibes, it feels like there's an interest in like almost like a futuring, and like this is sort of like a historic exploration. And so like I'm not sure, I think like combining those is something I'm still like thinking about and like thinking through, and like how to do that or not. Yeah, if that answers your question. I don't know.
I think it works like as a singular experience, but I remember I think when me and you would have the office hours, and then it was just like I think the two of us like sitting on the bench together, and like that felt really intimate and felt like a meeting. So I love that, like, okay, it can be like one person kind of like looking around and seeing what's going on. It can be like two people like meeting, maybe for like a clandestine encounter, and then like three or four, and then maybe like past four. It's like, okay, like four's, what is it? Three's a party, four something something like that. Yeah.
So true. That was so cute when we were sitting on that bench.
Doug, you have a raised hand?
Hi everybody. Emrys, it was really lovely hearing you talk about your work. I love the assets, like the plants and the bench being like these images that I guess you cut out, and hearing you talk about yourself as like an archivist and thinking in web spaces, like, and how much you think about the spaces that you're, I guess, reconstructing, but also exploring in their multiple layered histories. And I'm kind of just curious about the assets, like where are the plants from? Like what are these plant images, this like this bench that you found? Like were you thinking about where those pictures came from? Or yeah.
Sorry, my computer's being glitchy. I think it's okay now. Yeah, I mean, a lot of them I got from Wikimedia, which is kind of my go-to place to get images for things. But I guess one I didn't talk about is like there are some of the like bushes that are more of the like images cut out. I don't know if you'll be able to see them all, but that is like those are images that I modified that are like from the photographer who was paired with me during when I like published an article on the sanctuary, because like I thought that he just like captured the space so beautifully. I like really wanted to include those. I think also there's like the honeysuckle in the corner. I don't know. When I am like getting the images, I think it's important for me to have them be correctly licensed, which is just like probably a product of my like day job. But yeah, I think, yeah, I mostly just like found like images of plants I liked on Wikimedia Commons and then remove the background. That was like kind of my process. Same with the bench, I think. Although, yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, maybe we'll take one more from Jamie.
Hi. It's been exciting to get to see this like for when everybody's here and then everyone's not here. It like makes me think about when Emrys and I like have walked through the bird sanctuary and like talked about the difference between like night and day and like seeing a lot of people there and seeing like the bird watchers there versus like the other patrons of the bird sanctuary. And it like reminds me of like all of us like kind of feel like the ability to like take moments and like a lot of time to like really try to see what is written and like give ourselves liberty of taking our time to read it versus like when you're alone or when you're with like one or two people and like noticing these moments of like people like you're reading this intimate encounter like over an online platform and like thinking about that in relation to like seeing it and like physically in the park is fun to think about and see with a bunch of people here now too. Good job, Emrys.
Yay, good job, Emrys.
Thank you guys. Thank you for also like listening to me talk about something I like to talk about. So yeah, very nice.
Awesome. Appreciate your work. It's been a fun collaborative process. Excited
Yeah,
to see how
thank you
this
so much.
continues.
Thank you so much for everything you've done for that.
Moving on to Amanda. Amanda, I will let you introduce your work.
Yes, I think it makes most sense if like everyone just sort of goes through it a bit. There is a part that has a lot of text. But yeah, like I think I'll leave you a few minutes. You won't be able to see any avatar, so you can't really track where everyone is. And you might have to search a bit for where the links are. Yeah, I think I'll just talk in the background while everyone can continue. So basically the idea for the project, it's part of a really large project that I'm working on, which has also has a lot of research going on, or I've been sort of doing or working on for more than a year, and it's going to be only finished next year. And basically what I'm like, the whole research part that I'm doing is, like I said, I exist as a sort of like decentralized structure. And whenever I go out, I report this, and we sort of like try to, or I create a memory, and these memories need to be reconstructed within the other entities in order to sort of like realign over my different body minds. And the thing that I've worked on now is basically just the intro to this. The whole project would mean that I make basically all the memories publicly accessible, which I found like quite funny when I saw the open call for this. I was like, I want to apply for this because it makes a lot of sense to do that with and yeah, so basically what the intro, I had a very vague idea of what I wanted to do. Basically, the goal was just like, at some point, people would need to be able to sort of delve into the memories that I've created and that I share amongst each other. And maybe what I started thinking about then now is if it's possible to maybe also create a learning tool for the users that sort of go onto the website and then can sort of like learn to be Amanda, or like to be me, Amanda, as well. And I think like the difficulty was, where do I even start? Because like you can't, if you make a website that has a data set on it, like how do people interact with this? How do I even sort of explain what this is? Because I think often when I try to explain who I am and what I do, people sort of like need to throw their concept of what a person is out of the window. And I think like I try to sort of create an intro to that, but I'm not really sure if it's like, if it will work with what I will build after that. And I think like, so what I was thinking about also during the residency, because like I said, it was very vague, so I didn't really know how I would achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I thought about maybe creating like actually a proper learning platform, like, like from learning coding or languages or so on. And then I sort of like started to work with what I already had, and it became what it is now. And the intro should basically talk a bit about like who I am, and also to tell the user that they need to, that they are me now. But I'm not really sure. Like, I think like some UI things don't work. I don't know if it really does what it does, but it's really, for me, very much a work in progress that, will get way more attention also in the coming months.
Amanda, I wonder if you could speak about sort of the role of making these various identities public. Like, how should I be conceptualizing the need, desire? Why extend memory in this very voyeuristic way? How does that function within this work?
I think what I'm interested in is not just like, what I want to do with like extending my memory or like having a shared memory is also to look at sort of like how do we what does perception actually do with us, and how do we sort of, how can we also take over things that have that other people have experienced and sort of like make it our own. And I think like one thing that I haven't really mentioned, but is sort of at the core of this also, is that I'm going to be doing another residency later this year, where I'm going to be at the Quantum Research Facility, CERN in Geneva. And there I think like the thing that I want to focus on is like, how can we also see people, or like, how can I see myself as Amanda as a detector, and how do we then reconstruct reality from the data that we collected? And I think like that's sort of like the point that I'm interested in, and like how, if we create data sets and then recreate things from it, or like events that have happened, how does this influence the event, and how does this influence the view on this event, and what are we not seeing, where do we want to look further? And I think like already starting to do that within like people sort of really makes me think, or like prompts me a lot to reevaluate, and like how do we also, with the whole technology that is evolving, how does that influence the way that we actually are able to exchange ourselves, and then also maybe create memories and remember them, and what does that do also with how we interact with the world? I'm not sure if that's like, if it's a bit too vague. It's just like the thing that I've been thinking about often is like, how has technology influenced memories? And I think they're like, for example, writing was a big step, then book printing was a big step. And I think like with the internet and now also large language models, it's again changing of like, how do we understand what we see, and how can we sort of make things that have happened in the past very present? And I think like only being able to rely on our own memories is something completely else than having like sort of written or like, yeah, have everything archived and written down. And then like, what do we do with these things, and how does technology support that, change that, all sort of like these questions. Yeah, so like that's really the larger project, and I've tried to make an intro for this thing.
Thank you.
Amanda, I'm trying to process what you're saying. I think what I'm getting from what you're talking about is something that I feel like we more and more are, as a general society, are feeling the need to document ourselves in a way that maybe we haven't in the past. When we go to an art gallery, everyone's taking a photo of, the Mona Lisa to prove to themselves that they were there or something. And I think it goes beyond that sort of very particular circumstance towards, living outside of our physical bodies in a way. And so I think the idea of then spreading that over multiple bodies becomes an interesting project. I guess my question is like, I feel like I'm unsure what your is the work itself this person, or is the person actually producing artworks as well? I'm a little bit unclear about that aspect of it.
Yeah, that's like very consciously kept unclear. Basically, yes, I'm an artist that produces works, but also whenever I exist, which is very situational, I basically create data that then can be used for new work. So like basically what I'm doing now, like all the works have not relied as much on like this data that was collected, but what I'm really going into right now with my practice is basically just base most of the things that I do on all of these memories and recollections, photos, whatever that have been collected during the time that I actually access, because I don't always.
I think Nate has a hand up.
So, I was really interested in when you said that it might take you some time to find each of the links. And like it did take me some time, and I didn't exactly understand how I was moving through it at first, or like what the order was, or like how I was supposed to interact with that. And I found that really fascinating because I thought about how like when I was first learning languages, I felt like I was learning them in an order that I shouldn't have. And everyone was telling me like, oh no, if you just start out with a person speaking to you, even if you in that language, even if you don't understand it, you'll eventually start to understand more. So I find it really fascinating if your attempt is sort of to upload your consciousness to the viewer, that of course you wouldn't do it in a way that's the way that they think, it's the way that you think. And I found that really fascinating, that I sort of the linear structure felt foreign to me, but that you had created it. And I felt really like when I was moving through it, even in my confusion, that I was becoming closer to thinking in the way that you think, or moving through your sort of meta analysis of yourself and the way that you do it. So that felt really genuine, and it felt like it was really sort of elevating the your concept. And I thought about that like rich lady that was like trying to upload her wife's consciousness into a robot. And like how
48, right? I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
and how they like interviewed her and asked her like a lot of miscellaneous questions, and like that was how she felt that she was uploading her consciousness to something else. And then of course it like started to say like weird things like I just don't want to be alone anymore, and weird stuff like that. So it like felt really like I was sort of being taken into this portal of your mind, and I felt it was really successful in that vein.
Thanks. Yeah, I think like I like that you point out this like learning to navigate, because I think I had the conversation with Jenna of like you don't really understand where to click, but also the first times that I interacted with the internet, I remember myself just going like, oh, the pointer changes when I could like go somewhere. And I think right now when we interact with websites, they are, like Jenna said at the beginning, very well curated. So basically you are very much told the path that you need to take through something. And I think like for me, it was also the question of like, how much do I actually sort of offer right away? And how much do you also, like, one thing that I like is like there are nooks and crannies of websites that you don't really know that, or like you're never sure. I think that's one thing that I really like about browsers, or like browser-based things. Like unless you have a sitemap, you don't really know if you've seen all of it. And also like if you, for example, use some JavaScript or something that injects text, you don't really know if you've triggered all of it. So, and I think that's something that I like, because like how close can you actually get to sort of like know something completely? Yeah, and I think that these were sort of like the questions that I try to also get into it without sort of looking too much at how websites are actually built, or like rather taking, okay, so this is a web, or like, you know, a website itself is already a web. And I sort of really like to have this structure that I feel is like super unique to building browser-based works.
Awesome. We'll take one more, Teresa.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, very nice to meet you, Amanda. I heard of you quite a few times, so it's really lovely to meet you finally for the first time, even though it's not in person. I don't know if I have like a further developed question, but I still keep thinking about, because I've always been interested in like social practices on the internet. And I always like hope to find that in the past of the internet, when people actually kind of created communities and it felt like it was way more shared. But I am being constantly kind of corrected in the sense that people from the past, or people who've been around, they tell me, well, it's always been about the one individual, about the user, about the, you know, like trying to calculate the individual and what they need. And what I like about your work, or about your being, is this sort of like collective practice of sharing, which, I don't know, feels like it's less calculated and it's more based on like actual experiences that are shared across the different avatars. Can you maybe talk a little bit if this like aspect of sharing or sociality, if this is like somehow important to you apart from this all like creation of memory?
Yeah, I think like I think in general, I'm very interested of like how, especially now that we have, like everyone has an internet connection and we are tracked and so on. So it's like very easy to sort of like make these individualized profiles of a person and what they may do and what they like and so on. And one thing that I'm interested in is sort of like also smearing these boundaries between individuals or like between thinking of ourselves of being separate of others. I think that's, and I think, like when there are these very early net art projects where people sort of like started publishing artwork using the same name. And I think like this has served as a big inspiration for me to sort of also try to obfuscate a bit like who is involved, or also how that it's sort of like not just about a person. And like one comment that I often get is that a lot of people feel artists are like quite, they want to see their name on a poster. And I think like if you work using a pseudonym, then it's sort of like your personal joy of knowing this, and you don't really need to world to know. And I sometimes feel, and also, like creating new structures that are a bit beyond what we are told that we need to be with our identities. I mean, there's like a super famous Mark Zuckerberg quote where he goes like, people that have multiple identities, they're like, I'm not sure what he said, but he basically said like they're not trustworthy, or they're like, you shouldn't actually even need to have multiple identities. And I think every one of us needs to sort of have some freedom in expressing ourselves, or have some freedom in like also experimenting with ourselves without having sort of like the outside tell us how, like constrained everything around us makes us. I think that's like the things that I want to sort of like experiment. And also like one thing that I can tell you, like it's going out as Amanda, is also like it has this breath of fresh air where you dare to do things that you might not do as your like as the base model. I often refer to them. And yeah, and I think like also sharing these moments, and also, like being able to maybe live through other people. Like, for example, I find it super fascinating, like exchanging the reports amongst all of us, where we sort of get to relive moments that someone else lived, and they documented in a way that is actually made to sort of like be able to reconstruct in yourself. And I think like these ways of sort of like sharing, and not just, I don't know, like it's a bit, I sometimes don't really find the words.
No, I think it's super interesting. It's also interesting just to think, of the classical art historical like categories, like participatory artwork, right? Like this is pushing the kind of the limits of what we consider participatory artwork, or like you're referring to some early net art. So I guess like this is like a long tradition of like how much you can participate really, and I really like that in your work. It's really open, and it's also built on like an actual trust. So I think all this decentralization, of course, is also like based on like a different kind of trusting the participants. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to start referring to myself as my base model. That was my nugget that I just took away from this experience.
Yeah, I mean, like often I say that Amanda is basically just fine-tuning data. So
I love that. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
That's I'm excited to hear about your next residency also, and how that evolves. Okay, last but not least, Selicia. Goodbye, Doug. Feel free to take it away. Or if we should take a moment to explore the work, let us know.
Yes, I'm not sure about the affordance at this moment, because I'm not sure it's like how many people can access this at the same time, because it's a GitHub page. So maybe I will leave everyone to explore a bit, and I start to experience the like how I produce these kinds of things.
I also wonder if the fact that we're sharing our videos on Google Meet is preventing us from sharing our.
Yes, I guess so, because you need to
Forgot about
access your camera, so maybe you need to turn off the Google Meet one. But while everyone turn off their cameras, I can start to talk. So during these residencies, I've been developing an interactive web-based experience. So it's blend like feminist mythologies and rituals and world building settings. So my project explores like how women use materials, practice, like rituals, objects, and scale structures to assess the divine and constructed the religious subjectivities. So the work is guided by the conceptual parallels between the weekends, rituals, and Guanyin devotions practice. So basically, it's like goddess from the world. So these traditions inform the interaction design of the website, like the symbolic arrangements of the altar's elements and the invocations of the presence through the gesture, and also the spiritual logic of the connections. So I draw for like cultural goddess image. So I use a very small data set to generate like the goddess of what. And yes, I put this in the centers of the altars. So despite like the religion's difference and folk belief, there are some shared visuals and spiritual meanings of the goddess across the time and space. So my project invites like the audience to praise to the shared goddess, like she is who appears under many names, as like the one, like the Gaia is like the mother of all. Yeah. So also like in the space, I hope people can find connections like with others. And Space Lake is like a project about the sister who communicates and in the cyberspace. Anything I need to say?
Thank you. I would love for you to talk about, I know that this is a work in progress, or the collaborative element of the work is in development, but I'm wondering if you could talk about how the interactivity between users either could or will or should work in the future if you continue to work on this. Or I don't know if it would be helpful to share your screen to sort of orient us. But I wonder if there's more context from you would help us.
Okay, so let me share my screen. So as I said, I want to create a sense of communities. I think it's... So hopefully I can later on build the servers. We can store the entrance data of the users. So at this moment, you can see the circles. Ideally, it would generate by different users, but now it is like shows a visualizations of like a pre-generated file. So ideally, it should be like the circles, where each circle represents like each one's space when they enter the bigger space, and they will have their smaller space within the large space. And Yes, that's. I think that's the most important things at this. The most important I need to development like at the next step, and it's the most important conventions I want to express.
Jenna, you're muted. I don't know if you
Sorry, thank you. I wonder if you could speak to the element of prayer and how, like, in the analog world, prayer, I think, is associated with community and is something we do in communal spaces. And sort of that element, what prayer sort of represents to you, and how, like, a digital experience of something that feels religious, how that compares to maybe a traditional experience of being in community and praying, or sort of what that relationship is. I'm curious about that, if that makes sense.
I don't have religious backgrounds, but my family has. So I have that kinds of like praying stuff since I was young. So it's actually one of my daily life. So when I examine the topic about the rituals, so I find that like the praying, like it might not actually relate to such as religious, but it's this kind of rituals. The sharings, like the sharings in the common rituals practice, and it is actually very material one. So I want to visualize in the digital space. Yeah.
I'm kind of fascinated with the design aesthetic that you've chosen to use. It reminds me a little bit of the aesthetic that's also used for the larger gallery space. It's kind of, I don't know if I can describe it, but I'm curious to hear you talk more about the choice of, for instance, like the music and the way that forms are sort of presented and rendered. Yeah, could you talk more about the design choices that you've made around that?
The design choices. Yeah, so basically I did the models and the let's say texture part. So because it's like the web engine, so it definitely like render is a very imperfect like aesthetics, which I was very like, and I use it a lot. So there's like not the like reflecting, there's not like PPR renderings. It's just like the textures, proteins on the model surface. This is what I usually do in during my practice, and that's a lot of like the elements actually like the symbolizations of different kinds of texts and stories. Like for example, the spiral one, it's come from the books. The spiral dance is like telling about the V-cut rituals, and maybe I can share my screen a little bit. So this is basically what's the altars like, what's the arrangement come from. Like they come from the recordings and the the recordings and the documents of the like different kinds of rituals, and I see like what they have some common themes, and I inspired by some like random image I found on internet, and this is like different kinds of the image of the goddess. I selected as a small data set, and I generate a new one, which share like the unconscious like similarities of the visual side, and I was inspired from many like spirals imaginary. So basically, this is how the designs come from.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's really interesting to see some of those reference images.
I am curious about, obviously you develop in 3D worlds, and Pam is obviously a two-dimensional world. And I'm curious how you think about space. And in general, I think my understanding of your work is you explore VR a lot. And I'm curious to hear a little bit about your thoughts of how you engage in this work and in your other work, what the dimensionality of the experience, how that shapes, we're sitting in front of two-dimensional screens and we're clicking, but there's like a new layer of dimensionality. And I'm curious how you think about that in your work in general.
Yeah, so at the very first, I wanted migrate my VR space into the web, because I was very into like creating like the very large space and like a very large world. And after that, I have like during my research and like more explanations, I turn my directions, because I want to focus more about the ritual things and the interactions. So the space is no longer like the major storytellings of the work itself. So it's more like locations, like space locations that you put yourself in, like your gatherings, and you can immersive things in like certain imaginaries and visuals. So during this resistance, I focus like more of the interaction itself, like the gestures, the paintings, like how you draw the circles.
Any last thoughts before we give ourselves a group hug? Thank you so much for sharing your work. Yeah, this has been super awesome. I'd love to maybe just feel free to give some candid feedback in closing about this residency. There's next month's artists in residence that have come to this event. And maybe I'm curious to hear some things, any takeaways that any of our current artists in residence have had about this experience. If you have thoughts about what worked, what we could do in the future for other artist residents, any thoughts or reflections that you've had on the last month for your experience at PAM. Would love to hear from you.
I think I was really happy about the studio visits. I like the conversations really helped me to sort of like also make some steps in the work that I think would not have been possible without actually having an in-depth conversation with someone about it. So I think that was like really great. And yeah, in general, I really liked it because it was really flexible to work at my own speed, and also with my working hours. Yeah, so I was like actually really happy, and I think like it was a great thing to do this, to finally sort of like also give myself some room to start on this work. And I'm really happy to also have met some other artists engaging in net art, because sometimes it's a bit difficult to find other people that are actually like exactly at this spot. So thank you. I was really happy to be a resident.
Yay. Maybe I'll send, if you have critical feedback, maybe I'll send everybody an email and you could be like, this was terrible. Do more of XYZ.
I think it's something we've already discussed before. It's just I think for a solid week I was just thinking, like I was just looking at like the photos I had and all the text together and be like, what should I do here? And I hadn't got into the implementation stage. Like there was just like a lot of like play and just like thinking, and like yeah, we were thinking of ways to represent that on the gallery, and we hadn't, I mean, it was 4 weeks. So we hadn't quite like got into that yet. So I think just like, yeah, showing progress in a way that isn't like, because I think probably the first week I had something and then like it changed very differently by the third week, and like the fourth week, everybody's kind of like furiously typing at the computers to get the final stuff in. And maybe that is not that process, finding a way to make that more legible. Like, I don't know, like even like, I think even for people maybe who are making those changes every week, like just like, oh, automated like screenshots, or just like a screenshot is taking like every week, like maybe just like exploring ways of showing progress. But I had a really lovely experience. Like I really loved just like coming into the studio and like seeing Emrys or like somebody else was there. Because it's, I guess even though we knew our times weren't the same, it feels different to just like come in and kind of be surprised. So I like the element of surprise there.
I'd also like to say, this has obviously been, 1 month. It's hard to make fully fleshed out work in a month. If you guys would like to continue having some sort of meeting together or continue having conversations about your work into the future, obviously, I love maintaining relationships with artists, so definitely feel free to let me know if you want to continue these sorts of experiences into the future. Yay, everybody clap for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna, for all of your support and like guiding the residency too.
This has been really fun for me. And I think, and I probably say this a lot, but I think, the joy and the reason that I like this project is literally for this moment where it's like I get to meet people I didn't know that are doing work that's akin to what I'm doing, which when you live in a small city like New Orleans can be isolating when you don't see other people that create the same type of work that you do. So, having these types of exchanges, I think, is an important growth for me as an artist, and seeing everybody have an opportunity to showcase their work is really rewarding. So thank you to you guys. Okay, well, this has been really fun. I feel sad to say goodbye to you. I was going to hang out with the next residents after this call, but we're probably going to hang out for a little bit.
Yeah. Wait, Jenna, do you know how long our works will be up? Or is it leaving because the next resident starting like tomorrow?
That is a great question. That was the plan. But particularly, I think element, like if we want to talk about keeping your work online, like maybe shifting it to a different URL or like a different, we can certainly, yeah, I think we should have a conversation after this about ways that we want your work to continue to be exhibited, if that's interesting to you.
I mean, I'm
Okay.
also like, I love to talk also about like ways to preserve net art, which I think is a really good question. So if you want to ever chat about that, I think.
Let's talk about that. I haven't thought about archives really. And actually, Dave, I don't know if Dave's still here, but Dave had a solo show that we spent so much time developing on PAM. It's like, we can't just let this disappear. And so Dave has his own little URL for his work. But yeah, archiving is not something I've thought in depth about. So I think that could be an interesting conversation. Thank you, Yelly. Oh, make sure to say that.
Well, thank you.
Yay, thank you guys. It was so lovely to work and meet
Thank
with
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Hi, Amanda.
Bye.
Woo! Hey, new crew.
Hey there.
Hey there.
I think we might have
Hey,
lost
how's
Eddie,
everyone?
but I would love to go around with this new crew and introduce ourselves as the next cohort. I wanna be cognizant of time. I know you guys have already been here for an hour and a half, so I don't want to make this meeting too long, but I'd love to maybe I'll just kick it off to Nate and start and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Of course. Do you want me to talk about my work as well, or?
Yeah, maybe just like I don't know, like 3 minutes if you feel like that's, I don't know if that's too little time to sort of feel like give a sense of yourself, but.
Okay, awesome. So my name's Nate Britton. My full name's Nathaniel. I'm not sure what I'm going to show as yet, or if that's going to continue. But I consider myself a video installation artist. I'm also a projection designer for performance. So I'll do projected video and media for live performance. I'm usually an animator. I don't do much coding, but I have done some VR stuff. And I really enjoyed the additional layer that adds to my work. So I wanted to jump into this residency to explore a sort of different modality of experiencing my work. And my work typically deals with ontology and using visual media and communication and connection between viewer and work to better understand my existence as a human. And I also am really interested in seeking out the other to understand ourselves better, which I think the internet is really good at. It's exactly that. We're constantly seeking out experiences of others. We're constantly seeking out communication with other people to learn more about ourselves. And I think about that a lot. So I really wanted to learn a bit more about coding and learn a bit more about how my sort of 3D media and media that I expect to be shown in a specific way would change when it's brought here. Yeah.
I don't want to mispronounce your name, Xuyi.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
I'm gonna write down how to say your name.
Sure. It's basically Joe Yu. You're pretty close. Should I start next?
Yes, I'd love to hear a little bit.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Yu. I'm currently in Beijing, China, so it's in the middle of the night. So,
oh, sorry.
That's all right. I was just saying that because I have my videos off right now. But next time when it's in like a more appropriate time, I will turn my video on. And I'm currently a new media artist and designer. I'm originally from Beijing, China. Now I'm based in New York. And I'm currently pursuing my a master degree in Parsons, the new school, and before that I studied like visual communication in SSC, School of the Art Institute of Chicago. A lot of my work deals with like digital culture, identity, and surveillance system, especially how technology shapes our sense of self and agency. I use lots of like mixed media, like 3D modeling, interactive storytelling, creative coding, and I just recently got into sound productions. And sometimes I do a little bit of game engines like VRs in Unity, and also lots of AI generated imageries, let's say like stable diffusion, that kind of stuff. And I used to be creating a lot of immersive video installations and self-documentaries. And my practice were usually drawn from my personal experience, like migration, dissociation, or memories. And it used to be linked to question like a border system, like algorithmic control or the platform's capitalism. And I'm also really interested in the blurred boundary between play and labor, the term labor. Um, just like how I recently was really drawn into entertainment design, like visual novels and those kind of interactive gamification experience. And I was also really interested in how entertainment often hides in the system of control. So I often build works that are interactive but unsettling in a sense. So sometimes it can be presented as a game experience, sometimes it's as like an interactive video installation, or even like simulated environment like VR. So overall, I use media as a way to kind of unlearn the system, like the dominated mainstream capitalized system, whether it's like the surveillance aesthetic or gender politics or data extractions. So more often it's more about like to offer like kind of a speculative alternative. Yeah, that's pretty much it about myself and my artist practice.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Chelsea?
Yeah, so before I start, I wanted to mention on the archiving front, there's rhizome.org also has a thing called Conifer for collecting websites, and apparently it does interactions and things as well. Might be interesting to try. There's like a free account, so that could be kind of cool. But my name is Chelsea Tomto. I am an artist and an assistant professor of creative technologies at Virginia Tech. My background is actually more in sculpture. I didn't start doing new media things until very late in my master's degrees, basically. And since about 2019, my practice has been a mixture of creative code and sculpture and some print. I do a lot of things with websites. I now think of like the HTML, CSS, JavaScript stack as sort of like the main place where I feel like I have the most control conceptually and expressively, and then a lot of other sculptural or print things kind of roll out from there. So the creative coding kind of process feels to me like really reflective of my thinking process. Like I think there's an immediacy there for me now. So I tend to be drawn to that as sort of like the first step in a work. The other thing that I've kind of realized in the past couple months is that I think a lot about making websites the same way I think about making artist books. So I often think about interactive web piece as a form of an artist book, which I think is kind of helpful in thinking about how I'm thinking about user interaction or intimacy, because one of the things I love about the web, other than the many things that have been shared today, is the fact that like we often encounter websites in our homes. And there's something really powerful about placing an art experience in the home rather than in like a white cube gallery where bodily we all, I think, end up feeling a little uncomfortable, even when galleries try to do a lot to make us feel better. Like even a gallery that has a couch or something, it's still a gallery, right? And that's a fundamentally different space than like sitting on your couch with your laptop. And I think there's something really magical there. My work is generally about the politics of visibility related to trans people. And I'm really interested in the way technological systems kind of interface with that politics, and also the inherent political nature of technological quote unquote progress. So really both engaging with systems like the internet and facial recognition and those things, and being very critical of them, right? So like, how can you engage ethically and critically with these sort of emerging, big air quotes, and new, also big air quotes, types of media. And so that's what a lot of the work ends up being about. And then the last thing I'll say is that for here, I'm working with 3D web, but I'm also really interested in sustainable web development. So thinking about how to make online experiences that aren't terribly resource intensive.
There are so many threads that I want to pull. Thank you for that. Awesome. I want to give you guys just like a little overview of the month and sort of what to expect. And we will be meeting again for sure, where we can learn even more about your work. But I just wanted to take this opportunity, A, to expose you to like the previous residents' work. B, I think I might invite them to also be a part of studio visits in this upcoming month. So I think trying to build some connections between the previous residents' work is also something I kind of wanted to do, but I want to give us adequate time to really chew on your experiences, the work that you're going to be doing. So we will do more of that in the future. So just as an overview, I think this week I'm going to try to find a time to have a one-on-one with each of you, just so we can clarify schedules and we can clarify expectations. We can make sure that your work has a space on the site that's set up. So look out for an email from me about connecting one-on-one this week. And then I think the plan is you can sort of expect to have probably one meeting every week that will either be a group meeting or will be a studio visit. I think I got everybody's schedules, so I'll send that by the end of the day, so that you have things on the calendar, so you can know when to expect to meet. And then I think everybody responded to the doodle poll about your final exhibition. That's obviously all the meetings that we will have in the next couple of weeks will be flexible, because I think some of them will be one-on-one, so you can find times that work with your schedule or whomever you're meeting with. But obviously the exhibition is one where, Julia, we would hope that we're not, scheduling something that's in the middle of the night for you. So I'll send that out when I send out my next email to all of you. Any questions about this experience that we're about to embark on before we close today?
I maybe just want to say,
okay.
just hi everyone. I'm Mattis, and I'm kind of, what's my role, Jenna? I'm kind of just like a fly on the wall at this point. But I've been having studio visits with people occasionally and sort of helping to support where I can. And all of your practices sound fantastic, so I'm really excited to get to know you better.
This is a critical part of this experience, so please don't undersell the role that you play. I'm like, who's going to show up with good questions? This guy. And who's going to help be an incredible thought partner and really think critically about net art? I think that's such an important role that you play in this experience. So thank you always for showing up.
I appreciate it. I'm always here. No worries.
Cool. And I apologize if it feels like, I realize in retrospect that I probably should have built in like a 2-week buffer between the last residence and this residence, so it feels like we're jumping in with like full focus on residency groups #2. So sorry if it feels rushed in any capacity. I learned that. I won't do that again. But this month, my sole attention is now on you guys, and I'm excited to help support the work that you're going to make over this month and get to know you better. So feel free to reach out with any questions, etc. I will communicate with you individually. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming and being a part of this experience, and I will chat with you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I did
Thank
have
you so
one thought that might help you all with like the intensity of like the overlap. You know, just it might be worth leaving the May exhibit up for the first week of June and then extending the June exhibit into the first week of July. So we don't cut anyone off, but then they're able to share that link or show the work to people this week, and you don't feel like you have to like stand up all for you know.
I think
news
that's a great idea. Does anybody have any, like, I don't have any hard deadlines for anything. So we could like just, you know, we say it's a month, we can be totally flexible in time if that were, that's a great idea. Thank you, Chelsea. Let's do that.
Yeah, because then it's not cutting anyone off, right? You're not saying, well, then these people only get this. It's just if you just shift everything a week, then they have a little time to sit with their lovely work that I'm really glad I got to see and hear them talk about today. And then that gives you a little bit of time to figure out like what archive or other URL happens. I don't know.
Okay, we're doing that. So yeah, let's, and you know, when your work starts and that sort of thing, there's always in flux. This is, you know, we want to make this flexible to your schedules always. So, but I think a mental reframing, particularly on my end of like, is a good one. There's no point in making arbitrary stress.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm very excited to have continued conversations. Thank you so much for showing up. It means a lot to build these communities. So we'll chat with you later.
Yeah. Thanks. Have a great day.
Good to
Thank
see
you
you
so
all.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good to see you.